On a humid August morning, Brandon Davies, the newly appointed police chief, parked his car in the bustling lot of the Blue Ridge Precinct, a small city nestled in North Carolina's rolling hills. Dressed in a faded flannel shirt, worn jeans and scuffed boots, he blended seamlessly with the crowd. His appearance was deliberate. No one would suspect he was the man tasked with leading a department rumored to harbor deep-seated issues. As a black man stepping into a role of authority, Brandon wanted to see the precinct's true colors, untainted by formalities or prepared welcomes. His appointment had been announced only days prior, and he had kept his arrival low-key, planning an official introduction later that morning. Adjusting his baseball cap, Brandon took a deep breath. The weight of his mission to cleanse the department of its toxic undercurrents settling heavily on him. He entered the precinct through a side door, unnoticed amid the clatter of phones and casual chatter. Inside, the fluorescent lights cast a stark glow on polished tiles, and the air carried the faint scent of burnt coffee. Brandon moved slowly, observing the officers' interactions. Some swapped stories by their desks, while others shuffled paperwork. His presence went largely ignored until he lingered near the break room. "Hey, you!" a sharp voice rang out. Brandon turned to face a white officer approaching with a smug grin, his badge reading Officer Harris. A few officers lounged nearby, watching with amused curiosity. Before Brandon could respond, Harris sneered, "Lost, buddy? This isn't a halfway house. Take your mess elsewhere." The words hit like a slap. Brandon hesitated, torn between revealing his identity and letting the moment play out. Harris stepped closer, raising his voice for effect. "Didn't you hear me? Get out. We don't need your kind loitering here." Snickers erupted from the onlookers. Brandon's pulse quickened, but he held his ground. Then, without warning, Harris spat in his face. The room seemed to freeze. The warm saliva dripped down Brandon's cheek as laughter swelled around him. One officer slapped a desk, roaring with amusement, while another muttered about teaching strays a lesson. Brandon's mind raced, but he remained composed, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket to wipe his face with deliberate calm. "Is this how you greet everyone who steps inside?" he asked, his voice steady but edged with steel. Harris smirked. "Just the ones who don't belong." Brandon said nothing, turning to walk toward the main office. Moments later, the intercom crackled, summoning all personnel to the briefing room. The briefing room hummed with chatter as officers filed in, some clutching coffee mugs, others chuckling over private jokes. Brandon slipped in through a side door, now carrying a folder stamped with the precinct's seal. He stood just out of sight, watching the room fill. At the front, Captain Larson, a grizzled veteran, called for silence. "Quiet down, everyone. We've got a big introduction today," Larson said. The officers settled, curiosity piqued. Harris leaned against a wall, arms crossed, still basking in his earlier bravado. Larson continued, "Chief Thompson retired last month, as you know. Today, we're meeting his replacement, a leader with a stellar record and a clear vision for our future." Brandon stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. He set the folder on the podium and scanned the crowd, his calm demeanor amplifying the growing tension. Harris's smirk vanished, his face paling as realization hit. Whispers rippled through the room, eyes widening in shock. "Good morning," Brandon began, his voice firm. "I'm Brandon Davies, your new chief of police, effective today." The silence was absolute. Harris's bravado crumbled, his face flushing crimson. Brandon's gaze lingered on him briefly before sweeping across the room. "When I arrived this morning, I came incognito to see this department as it truly is, he said. What I encountered was revealing and unacceptable. Murmurs stirred, but Brandon silenced them with a raised hand. In just a short time, I witnessed behavior that was not only unprofessional, but a betrayal of our duty. Let me be clear. The toxic culture that's taken root here ends now. The room remained hushed, the weight of his words sinking in. Harris shifted, eyes glued to the floor. Brandon stepped closer to the podium's edge, his tone measured but cutting. Respect isn't optional. It's the cornerstone of our work. Without it, we fail our colleagues, our community, and ourselves. He paused, letting the silence press down on the officers. Some of you laughed this morning, thinking you were putting a nobody in their place. But every person who walks through these doors deserves dignity, badge or no badge. His words sliced through the tension. No one moved. Officer Harris, Brandon said, turning to face the man. Harris flinched, his earlier confidence gone. You embody everything that's wrong here. When you spat in my face, you didn't just disrespect me. You disrespected the badge, your oath, and the people we serve. Harris stammered, Chief, I didn't know. That's the issue, Brandon cut in. You didn't care to know. You acted without thought, assuming the man before you was insignificant. That assumption is why this department has lost the public's trust. The room stayed silent, every officer frozen. Brandon addressed the group. What I saw wasn't just one man's error. It was a culture where cruelty and bias are not only tolerated, but cheered. That ends today. He stepped back, his voice rising with conviction. I've dedicated my career to justice, not just outside these walls, but within them. Change won't be instant, but as long as I'm chief, this precinct will uphold integrity, respect, and accountability. With a nod to Captain Larson, he concluded, Officer Harris is suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. This isn't a warning shot. It's the start of a new standard. Gasps echoed through the room. Harris's face burned with shame as he avoided his colleagues' stares. Brandon stood, resolute. This isn't about punishment. It's about raising the bar. If you can't meet it, this isn't your place. But if you're ready to improve, we'll move forward together. I'll hold you accountable every step of the way. The meeting ended in heavy silence, officers filing out without their usual banter. Brandon lingered at the podium, watching Harris storm off, his anger tinged with humiliation. The others avoided eye contact, their expressions a mix of guilt and reflection. In his office, Brandon sank into his chair, exhaling. He knew this was only the start. Changing years of entrenched behavior would take time, and some might never adapt. But he hadn't come to Blue Ridge to win popularity. He came to make a difference. The phone rang. It was Captain Larson. Chief, that was impressive, Larson said cautiously. You rattled them in a good way. Thanks, Captain, Brandon replied. But the real work begins now. I need Harris's full record, complaints, reports, everything, on my desk by morning. You got it, Larson said, pausing. You're already making waves, Chief. Brandon hung up, allowing himself a brief moment of resolve before tackling the paperwork awaiting him. Over the following weeks, the precinct transformed. Officers who once egged Harris on now kept their distance, his suspension a topic of hushed conversations. Brandon made a point to walk the halls daily, greeting everyone, his presence a constant reminder of his leadership. Some officers embraced the shift. Officer Carter, a rookie, approached Brandon, admitting she'd stayed silent in the toxic environment out of fear. I want to do better, Chief. she said sincerely. That's all I ask, Brandon replied warmly. It starts with you. Others resisted. Harris appealed his suspension, claiming bias. Brandon stood firm, and a review uncovered a history of complaints against Harris, from excessive force to derogatory remarks. His appeal was denied, signaling that leniency for misconduct was over. The road remained long. Discussions on bias and community engagement sparked mixed reactions, but Brandon pressed on. Each small win, an officer speaking up, another rethinking their approach, fueled his determination. At a community event, a young boy approached Brandon timidly. "Are you the chief?" he asked, eyes wide. "I am," Brandon said, smiling. "My mom says the police don't care about us," the boy whispered. Brandon knelt to his level. "I can't undo the past, but we're working to do better. If you ever need help, find me, okay?" "Okay," the boy said, a shy smile breaking through. Moments like these reminded Brandon why he'd taken the job. By the end of his first year, the precinct wasn't perfect, but it was different. Officers who resisted change were gone, replaced by recruits aligned with Brandon's vision. The community, once wary, began to notice the shift, a renewed effort to rebuild trust. One evening, Brandon stood in the precinct's hallway, watching officers leave after their shifts. The laughter now felt genuine, inclusive. Challenges lay ahead, but for the first time, he felt hope. Change was hard, but it was worth every battle.